Hey everyone, my name is Vibin. I'm a product manager at Instacart. Today we're going to be talking about breaking into product management from business school. So a little more about me. Again, I'm a product manager at Instacart. I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with Instacart. For those who are not, it's an online grocery and household good delivery service based in the US and serving US and Canada. Been at Instacart working on customer growth, specifically focusing on our marketing technology stack, paid marketing, as well as CRM, emails and push, and promotional campaigns. Prior to Instacart, I spent some time at Amazon doing product work there, both for Amazon Education as well as for Alexa, where I was working on timers and alarms. And then prior to that, I got my MBA, hence this presentation. So I transitioned from business school directly into product management without having any direct product management experience. And also prior to business school, did not have a technical background. I did have a semi-technical background with mechanical engineering, but no experience with software development. So have had a lot of folks reach out to me over the past few years talking about how they could potentially break into product management without having a technical background, in often cases with having a more of a business oriented background or a business degree. So I wanted to share some initial thoughts that I had that I've been sharing with other folks in the following slides. So to give you a sense of who this presentation is for, or why you may want to keep listening, I generally have two types of individuals reach out to me. So the first set of individuals are like I mentioned, who may have more of a business background. That could be either from a few years of work experience, oftentimes in a different industry, finance, consulting. And a lot of times those folks have gone on to get an MBA, some sort of professional degree. There's another set of folks who may actually already be in the tech industry, but in a different part of the organization. So in sales, marketing, business operations, strategy, finance, et cetera, basically want to move over from one part of the organization into product management. So this presentation is really for both sets of people, even though my background and my experience and potentially some of my anecdotes are probably more geared a little bit towards the former, consulting to MBA and to product management. Presentation probably not as helpful for folks who have a sort of deep technical background and experience. So for former engineers who want to break into product management, probably a better use of your time going through other presentations to looking to others for advice. So given that lens, for that particular group of people, what makes breaking into product management tough? So a few things which I imagine you all are intimately familiar with, but I think worth restating before we dig into some of the details. High level, if you have a non-technical background, it can be tough to break into a field that is at least somewhat technical at almost all companies, without knowing how to code, how to read code, how to think about system architectures, et cetera. So I think that's like the one piece of it. And I think even broader than that, I think there's almost differing sort of understandings between those who are looking for PM jobs and those who are actually at companies working as PMs or with PMs as to how much technical expertise you need. So there's almost a lack of clarity of what is needed in addition to actually needing those skills, both contributing to the challenge. Another piece of it is just frankly, there's a lot of individuals who are looking to break into product management. I think especially now with sort of the brightness around the tech industry. So lots of interest, and frankly, in most companies, there's a small number of PM openings available. That has everything to do with how companies in the tech industry choose to invest their resources to sort of like PM in general being a newer discipline. So for a lot of companies, both old and new, PMs aren't really sort of like a well-established function there and not a priority for the executive team. And then lastly, just all around, there's uncertainty into what product management actually is. And I think it's especially true if you're coming from outside the tech industry and you're coming from a different background where you may have heard about product management, but you have no idea what that even means, how to find out more information. And if you do feel like ultimately it's right for you, how to actually take your first step into doing that. So given those challenges in mind, wanted to actually think about this a little bit PM style in the user journey. So really sort of three things I wanted to share some thoughts on. one, the reflection piece of making sure that you really do want to be a product manager. You know sort of what that means for you, as well as especially given the backgrounds that a lot of folks in this audience may have. What are types of PM jobs and companies that might make sense? And then for those who decide, hey, this is what I want to do, some quick tips on how you can be successful in that PM search. And then finally, once you're there, making sure that you're actually successful on the role. And I'll leave you with some sort of key takeaways at the end of the presentation as a cheat sheet, as a reward for making it all the way through. So here are some of the things I hear from people who want to be product managers. And frankly, like I don't necessarily directly hear from folks, but it's sort of implied by some of the things that they are saying. And these are all bad reasons to want to become a product manager. I think the first two go hand in hand. So folks want to be a CEO of a product area or a mini CEO, or folks want to sort of fast track into management. Sort of common misconception that, hey, like you're owning something like completely end to end, and you'll be like managing and leading a team. There's aspects of that which are certainly true, but the most important thing is you're very rarely going to be directly managing any individual in general, especially early on in your product management career. But in most cases, in most org structures, you're not going to be managing a lot of the cross-functional partners that are needed to make a product successful. So I think if this is sort of like the goal for you, I think there's a lot of other career tracks which probably make sense. But sort of the desire to manage or to have authority in that light probably wouldn't be fulfilled in the product management track. Another reason I hear is that a lot of folks say, hey, I want to break into tech. I've been doing work in finance. I've been spending time as a consultant, and I just want to move to a different industry. And that product management seems to make sense, given it's what most people decide to move into. I would say that, especially at the larger tech companies, there's a lot of valuable roles that are not really adjacent to product, that are really good landing places for people with alternative backgrounds. A lot of folks from those roles move into corp dev, into strategy, into business operations, into product marketing, et cetera. So I would strongly sort of consider folks to look into other functions, other parts of the organization in the tech industry versus just product being singularly focused on product management. And then finally, this is one that I think people have more realistic expectations on. Now, obviously, it depends a little bit on what your starting point is, but some people do believe that, hey, I've been grinding really hard at this other job for a few years, and I want a better work-life balance, and I might be able to get that in the tech industry, or if I move to the West Coast, what have you. Maybe some truth to that, depending on where you're starting from, but I think overall, product managers have a fairly tough time, and a lot of it I think is just down to like the way work is structured. You're not really sort of managing a team. There's really no one to offload work onto. So as a product manager, you're both influencing by setting the product vision for a team and like helping the team actually execute towards that, but also contributing very much as an IC to unblock that team. So you're a little bit playing the manager and the IC role without having the ability to actually spread work among the team. And that does lead to really days full of meetings and a lot of sort of work in the evenings as well. So I think in most cases, that's something shared across different PM jobs. So good reasons that I hear. So if you want to be a PM, you want to be really excited about these. You want to be excited about building really awesome experiences for customers, no matter what that means for your industry or for your company. You want to be really excited about working with a lot of different stakeholders with diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, and also really be willing to learn from them. I think you're in most cases a generalist, especially as you're breaking into the field. So in a lot of cases, you're not going to be the expert on the tech stack, on sort of experimentation setup. You may need to lead on the marketing team for the go-to-market expertise. And you have to be willing to collaborate and be excited about learning from those groups. And then related to that, you want to be more of a servant leader than someone who's sort of aspiring for that top spot. I think a lot of the value you add as a product manager is in just unblocking your team and enabling your team to be successful. And we'll talk more about that in other slides. So quickly, types of PMs. High-level product sits at the intersection of a few different areas: tech, of business, and sort of design and UX. But really, as you start thinking about PM roles, there's a lot of different flavors of product management. And depending on where you start, you may just start as a pure generalist, but I think a lot of companies have sort of diversified their PM roles to fall into a few different buckets. And it's really aligned to the three different elements of this Venn diagram. Excuse me. So you have more of the infrastructure or data PM or someone who's working with a particular type of technology. And they're obviously leaning much more towards the tech side. So you have a lot of former engineers, people with a lot of deep technical experience, or people who are frankly really excited about that particular technology and less excited about sort of, hey, like I want to release this consumer facing UI, or hey, this exciting business problem I want to solve. That technology is already figured out for. Then you also have on like the design side, like people who are excited about just launching new products the 0 to 1 p.m. And oftentimes these are folks who are a little more on the consumer side. And then finally, you have folks who are more on like the business side. So these are a lot of ex-business people moving into product roles, monetization, go to market, focusing on growth. And these roles are obviously more aligned with those parts of the company from finance to marketing. So all valid roles. And I don't mean this to say that, hey, like if you're a infrastructure PM, you don't need to think about the business goals. You don't need to think about any sort of thoughtful product design. But really, this is like a clearer way of saying like where these different flavors lean. And then obviously, if you have a business background, you might be thinking more of roles that have labels and tags and are aligned to like the top right than maybe something that's in the top left category here. Similarly, think about the different types of companies you could potentially be a product manager at. This is just like one small example that was particularly interesting when I was talking to folks about their post-business school search. But Google, as an example, is a very sort of engineering-driven culture. When you talk to folks at Google, most product managers will have a fairly deep technical background, and a lot of them have computer science degrees and are former engineers. Amazon is different. It's slightly more of like a product and business centric culture. And when you look at the PM backgrounds of folks there, a lot more MBAs and a lot more folks with deeper business backgrounds. And that might make sense given both the culture of the organizations, but really sort of like the products and like what these companies are trying to build. So high level, keep in mind that like every different place is going to have a different PM culture, and sort of look for the places that would value the expertise that you bring to the table. Another thing to think about is sort of size of company, which is a big one. I think like very high level, I would probably break it down into like a few different segments. So if you want to PM at a small technology company, I think once you get down to below 10 people, in most cases, these teams are just building product. So you want to be able to have the skills that you can actually contribute to that endeavor. And in a lot of cases, if you don't have like a technical background, it may be challenging to do so. But as that team sort of says, hey, like we need to actually go sell this to customers or bring this to market, we need to hire our first non-technical person. When you get to that point, then okay, like maybe you can join, probably not in a product management role, probably in a role adjacent to that. And then as you grow familiarity with the team and with the product, can jump into like the first PM role, which is maybe something that's slightly more of like a mid-stage company thing for them to hire their first one. So I think small company might be harder for you to immediately break into. Mid-sized company, move to an adjacent role, and then switch over to product management. And obviously at larger tech companies, you would have the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Apples, et cetera. In a lot of those cases, you do have more structured product management programs. So for people who don't have the traditional background or are breaking into product management for the first time, you have the scaffolding in place to be successful there. So I would say like there's a range from early to mid-sized company to big company where like, hey, you can jump in, maybe not as a product manager for the smaller company, but eventually transition into that, and certainly directly as a product manager at the larger companies. So let's say you do all this self-reflection, you say, hey, like I think PM is right for me. So let's talk about how you would actually go about getting your first product management job. I think a lot of people hate when I tell them this, but I think very important that the easiest thing to do, and what I would actually coach most people on doing, is if you can, try to find a product management or adjacent role at your current job. And the way to think about this is, I imagine most people have thought about like or read about the lean startup or lean startup principles. So think about like, okay, what hypothesis are you testing with each career move? Ideally, you would sort of isolate a single hypothesis to each test. So think about sort of pivoting one step at a time. A lot of folks want to make a jump from one company to another and say, hey, not only am I moving company, potentially geography, potentially industry, but I'm also going to shift job function as well. And that's usually challenging, both in like getting your foot in the door, but also in being successful at the new role, which is ultimately what matters. So think about how I can say, hey, I'm going to keep everything constant, but I'm going to start working a little more closely with the technology team at my current company. I'm going to see if I can actually apply for an internal role, or in a lot of cases, if that role is not available, see if I can work with someone in creating the space for that if it makes sense to do that. So would highly encourage, even if it's just for 6 to 12 months, doing that in your current role, testing whether this is right for you, building that experience. And then once you have that, it makes more sense to start looking elsewhere if that's a pathway that's available to you. So let's say you decide to either do that, or you decide to say, hey, like, let me actually find a product management job elsewhere and sort of apply to traditional means. I would say high level, I think the skepticism that a lot of folks would have for people with uh, non-technical backgrounds is that they are more likely to sort of advise, think high level about product strategy and set direction, but won't get into the weeds of actually building. So first of all, like, make sure that's something that you're actually excited about. And second, if that is, make sure that that comes out clearly through your resume, through courses you've taken, and through your actual sort of recruiting process at companies. So ways to do this: one, just like product teardowns. And probably a good practice as a product manager to do this on a regular basis anyways, but especially as you're thinking about recruiting, make sure you can sort of explain a technology product end to end fairly well. If you do already work at a technology company or a company that produces products, make sure that you can actually sort of tear down the product at your company and understand how the sort of get a peek at the inner workings of that. So then you can sort of explain, okay, like, this is how the stuff that my company is building right now actually works. Also, a pro tip: if you can do that for the company you're interviewing at, I think bonus points to you. I've seen a few candidates do that as well. Second, I think a lot of folks are probably doing this already, but there's tons and tons of resources out there if you want to pick up technical skills. Coursera being a big one, a popular one, Treehouse specifically for coding, and something that I've used before to teach myself iOS programming. Certainly sort of try those out. And I don't think obviously everyone needs to be a coder in order to work as a PM, even at software companies, but I think valuable to be able to understand sort of the syntax of computer programming, and also test out really whether you're excited about building software. And then finally, maybe as a stretch goal, if you do sort of take those programming classes, or if you have that experience that you picked up, I think very cool if you're actually able to put that in a place that others can access and include, for example, a GitHub link on your resume, similar to how you might include a LinkedIn link nowadays. So other thing I would recommend, that regardless of whether you do those actions or not, think about the narrative, and specifically about what experience do you have that you can bring to the table that would be valuable to the role, regardless of the level of technical depth that you have. That could be everything from saying, hey, like, I've founded companies before, I'm a self-starter, or I have deep business acumen, or I have expertise in a particular area that's going to be valuable for this upcoming B2C launch. Or maybe I've hacked together a bunch of stuff on the side, so I moonlight as a coder, even though it's not directly reflected in my resume. So think about what narrative you want to bring to the table, and actually make sure that carries through all elements of your search process. And then finally, sort of skipping ahead a little bit, assuming you've done all the recruiting hygiene of networking, like making sure you get referrals to places, doing your due diligence on the role itself, and making sure it's a good fit for you. The only other call out I would have is around just preparing for the interview itself. And very commonly, a lot of companies, a lot of product organizations are going to ask you about a product case. Folks are probably familiar with sort of the Cracking the PM interview and similar guides out there, and I would recommend taking a look at those if you haven't yet. I think like one pitfall to avoid is just these interviews are going to necessarily be different from the interviews you may have seen from your previous role. And at least in my experience, I had a lot of consulting cases when I applied for my first job out of college. And there's a lot of similarities and differences. Obviously, you want to think in a very structured way about how you answer a product case question. You're going to be measured on your sort of analytical ability, And we also want to look at the strategic insights you can glean from whatever data you analyze or have in that case. Very key differences, and this is both for the case itself as well as like what you would do as a product manager. Interviewers are looking for people who have a deep level of customer empathy. So really having a good understanding of different folks who might use a particular product or service, the pain they may face in using that and how you might improve the product for them. They're looking for the blue sky idea. So there's a much greater emphasis on creativity than there may be in other interviews and even in other disciplines. Then finally, that next step of execution. So making sure that you're not just someone to write up the PowerPoint deck, but you can actually carry this through launch and then to post execution. So or post launch. So certainly think about the right side of this chart and make sure that, hey, like you're probably good at the left side, but prepare for the right, because those are probably gaps for people who don't have the product background or a little less familiar with the space. So once you actually land the job, just a little bit of a scattering of tips in terms of how to be successful. We talked about this a little bit before, servant leadership. So again, misconception that, hey, you're going to be like the CEO, you're going to be at the front of the room and really representing the team in every single meeting. I think to a certain extent that is true, but I would sort of flip it a little bit. And I think your role as a PM is to just empower the team, to unblock the team, enable the team to do what they do best. And that's from engineering to design to data science to your cross-functional business partners on marketing and finance. Also, more of a general leadership principle, but oftentimes you will be sort of the visible person on the team. And you really want to sort of share success among other team members, or really the individuals building the product, and own the failures, protect the team if something goes wrong, and think about how to set the team up for longer term success. And then finally, related to all of this, just listen. Especially as a new product manager, you're going to be relying on the expertise of others, particularly on the engineering team. So listen, and don't necessarily just assume that what you're bringing to the table, the perspective that you have is always the right one. Data, obviously people know that you'll use data as a product manager. I would actually extend that a step further, and I would say that almost every product manager that I've met who's successful in using data is actually able to pull that data on their own without the reliance on a data analyst, a data science team, or a business intelligence engineer. And I don't mean to say like, hey, you need to just play those roles or moonlight as those roles on top of your existing job as a PM, but more to say like, understand where your data comes from, how it flows into your data warehouse, and how you can actually extract that data on your own. And that would do a few things. I think one, it actually helps you understand your product and your technology stack much more than if you're sort of asking someone else for that information. Two, it obviously gives you access to that information. So if you need it for ad hoc requests, you can do that. And then finally, it builds that trust and credibility with your technical teams. If you're saying, hey, like I'm actually digging into our database and I'm sort of seeing how things are structured, and I have more intelligent questions as a result of that. So related note, ask a lot of questions. I think can be especially intimidating as a new product manager, a new member of a team, to ask questions, but that's how you're going to be successful. And I think it's especially common for folks who have a few years of working experience and then are breaking into product management to have the humility almost to say like, hey, I don't know everything that's going on right now, but I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to sit in on brown bag sessions. I'm going to listen in on system architecture discussions. I'm going to read through ERDs, engineering requirement docs, and write my comments in there, and really show that, hey, I'm trying to understand what's going on here so I can contribute and really empower the team moving forward. And again, you'll build a lot of credibility with your partners for doing that. And then related, find your supporters. So obviously within your current working team, but also within the product organization at the company you're at. A lot of, especially nowadays, a lot of product managers would have similar backgrounds to what you have. So find out who those folks are, grab coffee with them, grab some time with them, just sort of chat about their experience, and maybe at some point they'll become sort of broader mentors or career sponsors within that company, or more broadly on your career path. And then also there's a lot of organizations, especially now out there, who support would-be PMs or new PMs, or even like mid-career PMs. So this is one example of a product organization I've been involved with in the past, advancing women in product. You'll find tons of other product organizations from product school or otherwise, who I do recommend just reaching out to. So you have a community of product managers that you can just talk to, right? If you have any ideas, if you just want to bounce off different ways of thinking about product. So if I so first of all, thank you for making it through this webinar. But just wanted to leave folks with three things, because you're probably going to forget all the other slides that I shared. So think of this as a little cheat sheet. Most important things as you transition from a non-technical background to PM, make sure you find the right PM role. Think about the type of business, the size of business, as well as the type of product manager you want to be, and then try to find those roles. Think about how you can demonstrate the appropriate level of technical fluency that matches your background and matches the roles that you're looking for. And then finally, build your community. Make sure you have strong working relationships with folks that you're working with directly, with other folks in the organization that you eventually join, and then more broadly within the product management, the technology organization, because that would sort of pay dividends down the road in terms of your product management, in terms of your broader career. Thanks again.